Okay, welcome back then. It is early August 1864. We've passed term. We left off in late July with the beginning then of the Third Balkan War against the Austrian Empire. And to keep you abreast of the forced deployments then, Rita Pasha was released from his position in Sofia, sent north to occupy a position in Plevna, south of the Danube. He was joined by Ahmed Pasha, who was released from his position in Salonika. Abdulkarim Nadir was based at the Arsenal in Adrianople, and his forces basically comprised of formations that were kept in the strategic reserve. This comprises a fairly traditional army of 3 infantry corps, one of them being a guard corps, 2 cavalry divisions, a couple of independent artillery. Keep in mind that these corps contain their own integrated artillery, so this is just additional independent artillery and then service asset units and supply trains. That then provides us with a formation on the south bank of the Danube, or a force of 3 field commands. Also, out of the strategic reserve at Adrianople, Mehmed Ali Pasha has been released with his force. He takes again a fairly standard army of a guard corps, 2 infantry corps, 2 cavalry divisions, independent artillery, service asset units, and again a supply train. He's given a slightly more generous complement of support officers, so Safed Pasha and Mehmed Ized Pasha command the Guard Corps and the 1st Infantry Corps respectively, and he is joined by a small portion of Hussein Avni Pasha's force, which was located in Erzurum. The remainder of that force has been sent up to Trabzon and is linked up with the transport fleet that we steamed for Constantinople. A friend of mine that's watching this actually watched the last video, and he's like, why don't you just use the transport fleet? So we're going to do just that. Okay, so embarked, and we're gonna actually muster our kind of offensive force, if you like, our western force in Salonika. Just because it's slightly further to the west, Salonika has been a target, a kind of Austrian target at that time. So anyway, 13 days to Salonika. That will then give us 2 field commands at Salonika, and we'll be positioned to move north. In terms of Hussein Avni, let's quickly check what support officers. Yeah, he has Namik Pasha. Okay. Now what we have left in reserve is a guard corps, 3 independent artillery regiments, some engineers, provosts, field hospital, and 2 supply detachments, and Abdi Pasha II, Lieutenant General. Now he's going to be joined by Bezid Pasha, who has been promoted to a 3-star general and has been released from his command in the Yemen, and I feel fairly comfortable to do that now. He's been promotable for a little while, so he's now a 3-star, and he's on his way. And he's a pretty decent 3-star general. He's probably not our best, but he's a pretty promising prospect, you know. And he's going to take command of the 6th Army, which is in the process of being assembled. Now, when we decommissioned those kind of, you know, sort of Austrian volunteer forces, the Italians, Ukrainians, and Poles, and so on, we did that principally to really reorganize those forces into garrison sort of forces. One of the reasons we do this is because garrison forces don't get a command penalty because they're designed as a kind of static defensive formation. So it's just much better value for money in terms of the number of men, the number of officers, the resources it takes, the upkeep. You get much more kind of bang for your buck, if you like, than having kind of reserve army corps formations that are like POWs, volunteers in your fortresses. They're expensive, they have a combat penalty, they're much larger formations. So that was a part of the rationale behind that. What we did when we decommissioned those forces, however, is we also decommissioned 2 standard kind of conscript formations. They weren't like Austrian volunteers, they were professional Ottoman army. Well, I say professional, they were kind of militia forces that hadn't really been converted into regular formations. It didn't make sense to kind of try and gradually convert these forces because that's more expensive. To just build a kind of militia corps, you might think, oh, I'm really saving money by doing that. Building a militia corps and then converting it takes a long time and it's more expensive. The reason being is because a militia, a conscript corps, and a regular army corps are just structurally different. They have different weights, they have different numbers of men, different numbers of officers. So you have to kind of refashion the force to some extent. And also, it's easier to train professional soldiers from scratch and lay the foundations for correct practice than to try and retrain forces that maybe have sort of fallen into kind of bad habits. So we decommissioned 2 militia forces. Now, quite some time ago, in fact, before the Austrian declaration of war, we began the construction of a guard corps, which is almost complete in Constantinople. In fact, the force is assembled. It's just finishing its reorganization. And just last turn, late July, before I passed turn, I began the construction of a regular infantry corps. That, combined with the guard corps that we have in Adrianople, plus the 3-star Bayezid Pasha, plus Abdi Pasha II, that is basically the recipe for the 6th army that we need. And that'll be assembled fairly quickly. We can see British formations very quickly making their presence felt in the Balkan Peninsula. That's really welcome. They're an ally, of course, and they have transit rights, so their presence there is perfectly proper and is welcomed. Now, the Austrians have begun their sort of opening moves quicker than the last 2 wars, really, where they kind of started off quite sluggishly, but they've moved what looks to be 1 army corps plus some support detachments to begin conducting a siege at Sarajevo. Can I click on the force at Sarajevo? I can. Not. No. Yeah, there we go. So at Sarajevo with a professional force, we only had 2 like infantry kind of divisions there. We still got a garrison of 54,000. That's great. That's larger than the forces besieging it, frankly. Plus that force is in the process of being enlarged. Plus we've got a huge stockpile of munitions and supplies there. So no danger of that falling in the short term, unless they bring in substantially larger forces, which maybe they have out of view. They also brought into play in Bucharest what looks to be 1 field army under the command of von Benedek. I think actually we should be aggressive early on. We've got 2 field commands that are not activated, but one of our field commands, under Abdulkarim Nadir, which is not in bad shape, is activated. He receives support from both of these commands to the south. We're going to press him north. It's a 2-day march. We'll set a sustained attack, and we'll see what kind of happens. If he falls back, we've got 2 army commands kind of in reserve, really, on the Danube. But we want to try and start creating a bit of pressure on this position, because what we're looking to do, of course, is to draw Austrian forces, hate it when that happens, to the east, to Transylvania. We want to draw them away. We don't mind if they're sieging Sarajevo, but we don't want them to have large reserve forces, centered around Vienna and Hungary. We want these forces to move into the east to try and counter our offensive across the Danube. This is, of course, our first opportunity to field test what is really a new army. Our army is somewhat different. I mean, we went for a fairly large army reform, beginning really just after the end of the last war. Our army looks different. It has different service weapons. It's transformed in an eye-wateringly short period of time, and it has a lot more firepower at its disposal. It's a much more effective army with the same commanders, keep in mind, than the army that we confronted the Austrians with in the last war. We have something much closer to technical parity with the Austrians now. I think in the last war, they probably already had kind of muzzle-loaded rifles, and therefore they had more firepower, they had greater range, and it meant that our commanders were much more likely to sustain heavier losses. They had to use terrain and sort of defilades and foliage and all this kind of thing to kind of close in enemy positions, and then I guess use kind of like cold steel, really in the last analysis to sort of push home offensives. But anyway, the war has begun. We've also sorted the main Imperial fleet, which is now blockading Trieste. It looks like we're joining a British formation, a 16th Battle Squadron, which is already doing the same. That's fine. We'll hold a position there. We'll hold a defensive position, and look to engage anything that sort of leaves Trieste. I mean, Austria has a very, very small kind of surface fleet, so there's nothing really to worry about. We're going to keep an eye on the trade boxes. No signs of raiding and no kind of commercial presence in the Mediterranean or the Black Sea that we can see. So there's nothing really to do in terms of commerce raiding. I suspect the British have sort of already done that job for us. So really Austria is blockaded, and not just by us but by the British as well. It's going to make it quite difficult for them to kind of trade. In some ways, they ironically will be probably compelled to trade with us. And commerce can exist between warring nations, actually, especially in the mid-19th century, but and beyond that as well, frankly. But anyway, so the war's begun, and yeah, I mean, again, it looks like a kind of, it looks like an extraordinary kind of decision that the Austrians would do this, and I think they're going to start paying the price. Doesn't look like they've made peace with Austria, with Russia. They've continued to kind of penetrate into like the Pripyat marshes, so South Belarus and kind of northwest Ukraine. But they've not really taken any towns or cities. Well, I say that. They've taken cities that are not garrisoned or anything like that. It doesn't look like they're besieging, for example, Kiev. And yeah, Podolia in the south, they've not taken that. So they're taking towns that are not really defended. Lublin was kind of theirs already, although it was controlled by the Russians. But yeah, we'll see how this kind of develops. I suspect that the Russians have just not really effectively brought the kind of numbers to bear that they need to kind of deal with the Austrian sort of problem. But there's a chance that there could be a peace in the works. That's pretty much it in terms of moves for this turn. An unbelievably good turn economically for exports. We're sitting at 2,000 private capital, and let's have a quick look. 24 units of manufactured goods to Austria, whilst we're at war with them. Probably through some kind of proxy. But yeah, that's one of the strange things, of course. Austria is dependent on imports because its productive capacity is so diminished. I've noticed that even in the last year and a bit, last year and a half that we've been at peace with Austria, they've imported a huge amount of manufactured goods and textiles and things like this. So yeah, textiles. I think it's probably, we import a bit of gold, yes, a couple of units of gold, that's fine. Yeah, domestic market sales then 193 for 712,000 private capital, but exports 134 for 568. That's an export record for a fortnight. Imports 21 units of goods for 114. I am going to set trade because have I not done that? I don't think I've done that, so I'll do that now. Actually, we'll leave that at 30. Okay. He who does not like round figures does not like life. Yeah, that's good. Happy with all that. I've got 4 units of gold that'll gradually convert, and that all looks kind of reasonably sensible. Let's go back to okay, that's fine. That's our export set. Let's just double check our assets balance to ensure that our kind of economic administration is sensible, isn't creating any kind of problems with regard to availability for goods on the domestic market, and there's nothing in the red. Everything looks kind of fairly kind of decent there. Got to really quickly check. Nothing to reply to. Okay, good stuff. Let's check the remainder of our reports then. Okay, so this is Württemberg. Austria's declared war on Parma. What are they doing? Again, it seems bonkers, but it's sort of not really. It's, I mean, it's, one can kind of only imagine the kind of Steam reviews that would be left, for a strategy game depicting the first half of, like, I don't know, the 21st century. Were the first half of the 21st century a period that most people were not familiar with? You can imagine the kind of Steam reviews in the sort of, the kind of rather sort of tedious, vacuous, combative kind of register that tends to characterize internet discussion in the early 21st century, be something along the lines of, despite not being in early access, this game has a game-breaking bug which seems to compel Germany to go to war with multiple other great powers simultaneously, not just once but twice. And in the Second War, despite the fact that at the very moment it was made apparent to Germany that its attempts to destroy the Soviet Union in a single campaign had failed, it then declared war on the United States. This would not happen in real life. Please educate yourselves. The development team are clowns, and this game is cringe. You can sort of, but it's, great powers make the most extraordinary. When it kind of happens in real life, you just sort of take it for granted and think, okay, that was a strategic mistake. But what Austria is doing is not that far removed. I mean, it's actually less dramatic than what Germany did, or indeed France did during the Napoleonic Wars. But it certainly is a pretty daft strategic mistake. And again, these things can happen for lots of different reasons, But it's certainly the case that some of the thinking in Vienna is probably, in some measure, far removed from reality. It's a bit divorced from reality. and you can see that in terms of its strategic kind of well, you can see it playing out. You know, you can see it playing out in terms of geopolitics. Their analysis of the the kind of balance of forces is sort of is not rooted in any kind of reality, and that's great for us. You know, that's really great for us, and yeah, it's going to start paying dividends, I hope. All right, let's quickly zip through the rest of these reports. Yeah, nothing sort of too concerning there. I haven't given any thought to this, but I do need to consider. I don't want to accumulate too much private capital. We're sitting at about 2,203. So I guess that's what, 2 million. I've become suddenly preoccupied with the real meaning of this. Yeah. What would be worthwhile building, I suppose, is steel isn't a problem. I tell you what we are going to do. We are going to build another furniture shop because we kind of decommissioned one in Constantinople to make way for. Yeah, to make way for a luxury goods factory. I'm actually going to build it in Salonika. It's got good access to timber there. Yeah, let's do that. 27 units of manufactured goods. 27 steel, 9 coal, 720 private capital. Let's do it. That brings me down to 1,400. Okay, in terms of other private capital. Now, let's continue with a little bit of a project. So, I think it's Gondar has access to coffee, and there's an Italian mission there. We're going to get a trade post there. We're establishing ourselves really nicely in Somalia now. I think I've mentioned this in sort of prior videos, but yeah, the Somalis have really got the hump with the Italians. They're not allowing the Italians to make any kind of settlement there, and if they try that sort of nonsense with us, you know, we won't stand for it. We've got forces in Yemen at the ready, but yeah, the Italians can't get a toehold in Somalia, and that's good to see. Yeah, there's nothing else in terms of colonial projects that we need to kind of push forward just yet. He says, that's a good what. There is. Okay, we're going to cancel that colonial merchant because we need to kind of prioritize a little bit. Oh, I can't I wonder why that is. We've got opium and Hadramut and Mukalla. Well, actually, that's more lucrative anyway, frankly, so fine, okay, whatever. Road is 40 plus 5 manufactured goods. Alright, let's push a road in there. Okay, we're going to stick a stretch of line down to Pristina because we had a coal mine there. $675, 22 manufactured goods and 27 steel. That's nominal cost. It may be more because Pristina's a bit hilly. Okay, that leaves us with relatively little steel, but that's some nice investments. Operational costs sit at 502. We've got 638. That means we won't incur any inflation. Steel we're short on. Manufactured goods appear to be okay. We will make some adjustments, however, in terms of exports, and we're going to scale exports down. We'll export 10 units. And we're going to import. Where should we import from? I guess the UK. We'll focus the UK. This is kind of a guaranteed source. We have got a kind of trade agreement with the British. And go for 20 units just this turn. We have got really, really good production of steel. But yeah, just 20 units just to sit us at a nice kind of stock inventory for the next turn. And it will instantly cut that off. Right, that's pretty much it for this turn. Military moves made then, so we can probably anticipate some action in Bucharest in the next fortnight. Early August, going to put you on pause past turn, and we will pick up in, well, I guess late August. So yeah, see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. Late August 1864, and we move into Bucharest. It's the first engagement of the Third War. And yeah, it's good to see. We give von Benedek a bloody nose at Bucharest, destroy one element, and irritatingly lose two of our own. An overuse of cavalry on the part of Ahmed Pasha, who assumes theatre command. But it's in the bag. It's 20,000 losses, but we inflict 32,000 casualties, and that's nice to see. And that's a nice kind of field test for the sort of new army, as it were. And yeah, really, really good to see. On the to the downside, however, we are seeing a large Austrian concentrations in Moldavia. To that end, we're going to move Rita Pasha and Ahmed Pasha into Bucharest, and I think we're set to kind of hold. We'll just sort of standard defense. We won't get to defend at all costs until we're really comfortable here, and we're going to try and hold the siege of Bucharest. We're going to draw this force down. The fact that they've got this many forces this far to the east is welcome news. It's good to see. We want to try and tussle with this force a little bit. You know, even if we sustain a minor defeat, we have to fall back. Drawing them even towards Plevna wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Now, the advantage of having a transport fleet comprised entirely of steamers is they tend to be much more punctual. Hussein Avni has then arrived and disembarked at Salonika. We'll add to his command the remnants then of his force that was brought by Raoul. We'll give Namik Pasha command of the Imperial Guard Corps in his force. That then is two commands set. We've got Mehmed Pasha and Hussein Avni Pasha. Really, really good start this. I mean, like within like, you know, a month we're already engaging Austrian forces. We've got really good force concentration very quickly on the Danube. And we've really got our offensive Western Command prepared at Salonika. They're not activated, but we can begin to move them towards assembly areas. And yeah, it's much more of a war by timetable, and already you can see the benefits of having a kind of clear plan of action beforehand. And it's come off. We're going to move these boys up towards Leash then. Hussein Avni may get there faster. 9 days. 9 and 12. How long does Zvornik? Oh, what happened? What happened? Okay. 20 days, that's a bit of a shame, isn't it? And they can't force march him. 15. We'll go with that anyway, frankly, because they may be activated next turn. They'll be in niche and we can just nudge them up to Zvornik on the basis of a force march. But we'll get them into the assembly area. Then it's still only one corps besieging Sarajevo. So that's okay. They do have forces in Kataru, which is no longer a fortress. It's not clear what they have there, but it looks like there's some kind of Montenegrin kind of partisans, not in Montenegro, but they've moved north into Qatar, and they're giving us some good intelligence. And there's an army in Dalmatia which has been expanded. We'll keep an eye on that. My thinking is the 6th army, which is being assembled at Adrianople, we lift that. We use the heavy lift capacity and deposit that at Spalato, simultaneously to conducting our offensive into Sarajevo. That guards the sort of left flank of the Sarajevo move. It stops this force falling back to Spalato. Spalato is also a victory location. It's a significant city. And that gives us then 3 commands positioned here to conduct a strike north towards Vienna. And having all 3 forces activated would be a dream come true. But at the very least, we can have 2 of them activated. One of them can do maybe a kind of a screening action. We can see there is an Austrian force at sort of Venezia. So they do have forces in Italy, of course. But so far, so good. So far, so good. We'll see how effectively and aggressively they use this kind of Moldavian force. This is like 3 armies, I think, or more. I think this is a large part. I mean, they did just take Podolia. So I think that they might have pushed this force south. But then that leaves them rather kind of vulnerable to the north against the Russians. A lot of this depends on Russia maybe taking a bit of pressure off us. There is a Russian force in Bessarabia that's gradually getting larger, but it's not enough to deal with this force. And we've got the British guarding our right flank at Constanta. And even if they give the British a drubbing, we've got a really large fortress at Constanta. That should hold the Austrians for some time. Or so the theory dictates. Yeah, but that's it. In terms of military activity, that's it. I have set economic admin for this turn. I'm going to quickly check through some of the other reports. Yeah, so the other conflicts, then the Scandinavian War continues. It drags on. God knows how the Russians and the Prussians got themselves bogged down in there. The American Civil War, I think, is all but over. The Confederacy just sort of reduced to an enclave around New Orleans. And the Taipei, is it the Taipei or Taiping? I think it's the Taipei Rebellion. Chinese Civil War continues. It's been going on for like 15 years almost now, you know. Yeah, solid round economically. Drop off in domestic market sales, disappointingly, to 665. Not sure what accounts for that. Still good exports, though, 370,000. Yeah, returns for only 111 units exported, 39 for 118. So, not a bad round, but yeah, you can already see that the war's having a bit of an effect on the economy. Very quickly, really. That'll do for now. Okay, that's all good. Like I say, admin is set. I tend to always like to kind of double check it anyway. Yeah, nothing missing around toward there. A bit of a drop off in terms of gold availability. Chesapeake pushing out 19, demands at 80. Columbia, we've got a request for 6. The main problem with gold is just demand already. And I don't think we're the only ones offering a premium either. But that's okay. Assets balance looks good. Then everything's kind of squared away. Right. That's it then. We'll pass turn. The hope is the Austrians don't push too hard for Bucharest. They may well do, but we'll have 3 commands there placed. You know, within 5 days. Yeah, in 5 days' time. That gives us a fairly substantial force that can defend against. It depends how much this Austrian force commits to Bucharest. If indeed they do that, they might be looking at Bessarabia or Constanta. We don't know, but we'll see. The hope is that force at the very least. See, the good thing with sort of having, you know, the British and the Russians is that this force kind of has to split itself a little bit, really. Although neither the British or the Russians or we are at war with the Romanians, which is irritating. The Romanians, of course, give the Austrians kind of transit rights. And it is tempting to do something about that, to make a move against the Romanians, but I think we'll pick our moment, to tell you the truth. There's no point in doing it now. We'll have to check the Romanians' kind of relations with other great powers as well. Yeah, that's it. It's late August then. Our past turn, and I guess we'll pick up in early September. So I'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back then. Early September, and yeah, good opening engagements again. So a significant action at Bucharest, which on the surface of it kind of looks like a defeat because all of our forces aren't in Bucharest anymore. But actually, we inflicted significant defeat on an Austrian force of a similar size, although I'd fully assume that's the advanced force that's kind of moving down. That force is heavily defeated. We inflict 55,000 casualties, destroy 5 elements. We we lose a heavy cavalry regiment into the bargain, and we only lose 25,000 casualties, take 7,400 prisoners. We get 3 national morale points for that. That's a tidy victory, and that's really doing what it's meant to do. You know, this stuff is really a feint. If we can make headway here, great, but you know the idea is to try and draw Austrian forces south, get them to commit to the Danube line, and that is exactly working. Furthermore, when I think Ahmed Pasha, who is the theatre commander for this area, once he detects that the Austrian forces here are overwhelming, he pulls his forces back to the south bank in good order. That's really good to see. Good bit of initiative there, and we're now set to kind of hold a position in Plevna for the time being, at least anyway, and we do need to rebuild some of our cavalry regiments, so we will have a look at exactly what ones they are. So it's one of the regiments of Abdul Karim Nadir's command. And also cavalry regiment for Ahmed Pasha's command. Okay, good. So job done in terms of drawing Austrian forces south. They pressed south across the river. We've got a nice defensive advantage there. And we've got the British guarding our flanks. We've got the British in Sofia. So, yeah, it's feeling good. It's feeling good. And they've made pretty good progress. Hussein Avni Pasha then is in Zvornik and in pretty good order despite a fairly extended march. Mehmed Ali is activated and he's 1 day out from Zvornik. We're going to press him on into Sarajevo, and he's going to be joined by an unactivated Hussein Avni who's 6 days away. That means that within 6 days, it's 5 days, and a day later, Hussein Avni arrives there, and that secures a position in Sarajevo. And we're going to look to conduct a landing in Spalato. We don't really have the forces quite assembled yet, so we've got. Let's have a look at the reserve, what's left of the reserve army ports. Basically, most of the kind of nuts and bolts are necessary for an army, save for 2 corps. So one of those is... And in fact, I'll tell you what. Constantinople gives us slightly better port access. Let's move the army. Whatever. I guess I could do the old good stuff. So what was I actually doing? This is the problem with this kind of immersive stuff. It distracts you, right? So we'll move that. That's 2 days from Constantinople, and the infantry corps is not quite ready yet in Bursa. But we'll move the heavy lift transport fleet back to Constantinople. 7 days. Once that force is complete, we'll embark it, or at least most of it, and land out at Spalato. That'll secure the left flank, and that force will function as a screen. It'll move up from Spalato to Fiume to Trieste, and basically try and block Austrian forces moving up from Italy, and then the 2 commands will move up through, I guess, Zagreb, Marburg, and the shortest route to Vienna, frankly. We're still within the kind of war season. It's early September. Weather is still, for the time being, clement. It's only going to be like that. I mean, you know, it's always a bit hit and miss, but for another month, maybe 6 weeks, if we have a really good, a bit of an Indian summer, a dry October, then that would really work in our favour. We want dry, kind of dusty sort of marching ready. We don't want kind of quagmire to slow our pace, but a really good beginning to the war. Really beginning, like promising, and the presence of more substantial British forces than I had imagined is encouraging also. And the fact that the Austrians have not yet secured a peace deal with Russia, and it looks like their offensive kind of into Ukraine, Belarus, it's stalled a little bit. And my guess is a large part of that invading force has pressed south to try and deal with the Danube incursion by us. So yeah, reality check for the faction in Vienna that like led the Kaiser to believe this was doable. They'll probably attribute it to Hungarians or something, I don't know. But yeah, good stuff. Let's quickly check the rest of the empire. Disappointing round economically. Like alarmingly large drop-off in terms of domestic market sales. I can't quite fathom why. So we've got missions, and yeah, we're going to go on there, it's fine. We don't yet have the penetration necessary. Yeah, drop-off in state revenue as well. Let's check our Academy of Sciences quickly. $1850, then that's 1860. We're a little bit behind in terms of naval technology, so we're going to keep up a line, I think. 46% at Qatar, it's just not enough, is it? Right. Nothing else to do there. The fleet is still sitting up outside the kind of the Gulf of Venice, I suppose. Horribly kind of optimized map scrolling. It's just so pain. It's a weird game though, because at times it becomes really fast and really responsive. It's really strange. It's there's no kind of rhyme or reason to it. Then it has moments where it really struggles. And bear in mind, I don't have I'm not running Windows 3.1 or anything. It's like I'm not running some kind of crazy old machine. It would comfortably be able to run this game. It's just sort of vintage age already. We'll get these boys. We'll get the main Imperial fleet actually in the Gulf of Venice for the time being. We'll move them south to support the landing at Spalato. I think when the time comes for that. We'll probably be about 6 weeks off from that, I reckon. So that might even happen a little bit after we conduct our move north. That's okay though, because that'll draw Austrians possibly south towards Spalato. It might serve as a bit of a distraction. But we might set B-Hatch as a kind of staging area, get some force concentration in B-Hatch, and that's a reasonably short march. But we have to kind of it's going to require a little bit of careful timing. But it's yeah, a good start to the war, I think, and I think I'll leave it there. It's a nice opening chapter. We'll give the Austrians a good bloody nose at Bucharest. Not that we're going to fixate too much on things like national morale, but they're 118. Yeah, I mean, we'll keep working them on the Danube, I think. We've got 3 commands there. I mean, it may even be the case that we release the 6th command and the Bayezid to the kind of Danubian line. If that comes to pass, that's okay. I mean, 4 armies would probably be in a position to counter that position. And it's a large Austrian force there, although they still have forces, some fairly substantial forces, in fact, that they held back in Moldavia. I guess to keep them options open. Whatever force... Okay, so they've actually pressed into Bessarabia then. Interesting. And Bessarabia is Russian controlled, but yeah. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, and I think next video we'll pick up, it's early September. I think we'll pass turn, because there's no real moves that we're going to make. we're going to basically press up into Sarajevo, secure the ground around Sarajevo. It looks like the Austrians lifted that siege anyway. They've pulled forces off from that siege. I think that force, it's the force that's moved into Montenegro. Their supplies seem reasonable. They're struggling a little bit with a very large force that just moved south into Bucharest. But yeah, good opening play. We've very, very quickly achieved force concentration using a combination of railroads, our heavy transport fleet, and we've kind of got all the pieces in place very quickly. And within, really, when did the war begin? Late July. I mean, within kind of, within 6 weeks, we've inflicted 2 kind of defeats to the Austrians at Bucharest. So it's very, it's not like other wars that we've had that are quite, they kind of gradually sprawl and become more intense. This one, straight off the bat, it's like a continuation of the old war, and with similar kinds of results. But yeah, good to see. So we'll pick up, the next video will pick up then in late September. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.